Everybody knows the name F. Scott Fitzgerald. It was a name that appeared on the cover of that book that we all had to read in high school. But we don't know much more about him. Until today, I really did not know that much about F. Scott Fitzgerald. I knew he wrote The Great Gatsby, and that's about it. It turns out his life story probably could have fit directly into a book like The Great Gatsby. Considering I'm covering him in this series, writing and drinking like famous drunk authors, you can probably assume he was also an alcoholic. Hi, I'm Patrick Nyland, and today I'll be drinking gin like Scott Fitzgerald. In this video, I'll drink a fair amount of gin while reading The Great Gatsby and then give you my thoughts on it. I will then drunkenly talk about F. Scott Fitzgerald's life before trying to write like him. The drunk writing sessions typically do not go well because despite the stereotype, drinking does not help you write. Alcohol is actually really destructive in the writing process, and that was really clear in Scott Fitzgerald's life. If you do choose to drink, be sure to do so legally and responsibly. Now that I think about it, it's kind of ironic to talk about legal drinking when you're holding The Great Gatsby. With that being said, let's get this Gatsby party started. Now this might surprise you considering all the drinking I've done for college and for this channel, but I've never tried gin, so I'm going to try a shot of that right now. I don't know why, but I'm kind of scared. Here goes nothing. Oh, that's nasty. Oh, it tastes like a Christmas tree. Oh God. It lingers too. This might be worse than the eggnog. What was that, 47.3%? Damn. Now, apparently, the reason why Scott Fitzgerald liked to drink gin was it wasn't apparent on your breath. And that's complete bullshit. There is no way this is not apparent on my breath right now. Also, now that I think about it, picking a favorite drink based on what's not apparent on your breath is the most alcoholic statement I've ever heard. Now, I'm going to be making his favorite gin drink, the Gin Rickey, because I am not drinking this straight up. There is no shot I'm taking another shot of that. I've now made myself a Gin Rickey. As you can see, it kind of looks pretty nice. Let's see how it tastes. Not bad. I expected that to taste a lot worse. The lime basically nullifies the whole Christmas tree taste, and you end up getting some sort of soft flavor. Like the gin flavor is still there, but now it's muted, which makes it actually sort of pleasant. Perhaps Scott Fitzgerald's taste in alcohol was not as bad as I first thought. He still drank too much, though. Speaking about drinking too much, I don't remember much of The Great Gatsby at all, but I do remember there's a lot of alcohol involved. So I'm going to drink a few of these, read all of this, and I'll be back in a few hours. Let me just say, after reading this book, Gin Rickey does not really sound like an upper class drink. That being said, these are really good. This is my fourth one. Probably shouldn't be having a fourth one, but I'm having a fourth one. I have never heard someone order a Gin Rickey at a bar, but let me tell you, they're really good. Now after drinking and reading The Great Gatsby, I've had two thoughts. Not so deep, after looking at the back cover, Scott Fitzgerald really looks like Frankie Borelli. Low-key, as an Islander fan, I recognized his face for a long time. I couldn't figure out why. He looks like Frankie Borelli. Also, before I review The Great Gatsby, there are a lot of strong literary opinions about this book. So before I actually review it, I'm going to throw my notes away. Now that my notes are gone, this is a raw, authentic review of this book. Let me start by saying one thing. The Great Gatsby cuts to the point. As a writer and a reader, I hate books who go on and on and on. Now, before we review this actual book, let's review my comments on the book that I wrote back in high school. Comically, I stopped annotating this book after 2 pages, because to be honest, annotating books is kind of stupid. As a writer, and I might be biased based on my style, the whole point about writing a scene is making people remember it. If a scene is actually really good, you don't have to annotate it. You understand what it means, and you understand it's really good, and it sticks in your mind. In my opinion, as a writer, the idea to annotate a scene to remember what happened, this and that, it's dumb. Because if you have to write it down, it was not good enough. I say all that to say this. This book is very well poetically written, but it is not a good book. Oh, you said it wasn't a good book, but some of the best American literature of all time. How is that possible? I will say this. The Great Gatsby is a time capsule. It's an incredible picture of what was. Out of all the dumb books that teachers make us read in high school, this is one of the books I feel we should actually read. Scott Fitzgerald did an incredible job of taking a screenshot of his time period. The problem is, his time period sucked. His picture of the 1920s only included the rich, but also, so did histories? For the record, his writing style does fit really well with the rich of his time period. At the same time, it insists on itself.
Didn't you like about it?
It insists upon itself, Lois.
What?
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
Because it has a valid point to make. It's insistent.
And I know saying something insists on itself is kind of dumb, but I'm doubling down on it, especially with this book. And what I really mean by that is I just find every part of this book to be so pretentious. While reading this at points, it really feels like Scott Fitzgerald is trying to dunk on you. The word choice and literary devices used at points in this book are just so obnoxious it made me want to put the book down. And before people comment that I didn't simply get the book, I got it. Daisy is a metaphor for the American dream. I get what this book is trying to say, but the actual plot of the book is not good. And for me, I feel like a plot is the most important part of a book. And the reason why I say this story insists on itself is at points it feels like Scott Fitzgerald just inserted himself into the character of Nick. At points this just feels like an essay on how the American dream is dead, when in reality Scott Fitzgerald had the American dream right in front of him. He just couldn't stop drinking to seize it. And for that, I give this book 3 stars. Boo! Now I'm supposed to talk about Scott Fitzgerald's life, but I had to pee first. It's kind of funny how The Great Gatsby in high school took me 4 weeks to enjoy, while now it took me only 1 day and 3 hours while drunk. That was the only bit I wrote in my notebook before I threw it across the room that I didn't get to say, but it's kind of true. This was a really short read. And despite what you think about the book, The Great Gatsby, I assure you the life of Scott Fitzgerald was very exciting. Honestly, there were a lot of parallels between this book and his life, and ironically, at first, this was not what he was remembered for. Seriously, when Scott Fitzgerald first released The Great Gatsby, it was not a hit. Honestly, that really shocked me because I can't remember anything else he was popular for, but apparently he was popular for other books. Scott Fitzgerald was born on September 26 in 1896 in Minnesota in a middle-class family. From his early life, Scott Fitzgerald was obsessed with wealth and the idea that wealth equated to his personal value. When he was 12 years old, his father lost his job and he absolutely panicked, although the fact that his family was fine because his mother had a lot of inheritance. Despite this, his father losing his job crippled his self-value. He ended up attending Princeton, which elevated his self-value, but he never actually graduated. In World War I, he entered the army, and he instantly regretted his decision because he felt like he would not be able to write the stories he wanted to write. But in some coming grace, World War I ended, and he did not have to actually enter the army. So he was free to do what he wanted to do, which was write. It was there where he met Zelda, his first wife, who I thought he met in a video game, but apparently that video game didn't exist. Apparently, Zelda was just his wife, a real person. That's a real name. We're not going to talk about the fact that I thought, like, back in the day, I thought he was, like, really obsessed with the game Zelda, which, honestly, the game Zelda was a lot better than his wife. She was not the best person. It's a good game, though. It's a really good game. Like, so, honestly, like, anyway, him and Zelda were in love, but originally she rejected his marriage proposal. This kind of inspired Fitzgerald's opinion of being unable to acquire the rich girl. Which, for the record, I get it. Living in 2025, rich girls kind of suck sometimes. They're really obnoxious, but, like, there are other girls in the universe. Like, they're not all... Like, it's honestly kind of on you for only approaching rich girls. Like, so Zelda did not accept his marriage proposal until he was actually a famous published author. Which he was once he published his first novel, The Silence of Paradise, in 1920. And for the record, Zelda married him after he published his novel. Now, Scott and Zelda lived very prominently during the jazz age of 1920s. You know those parties that Gatsby would, like, throw in The Great Gatsby? Like, Scott Fitzgerald was actually throwing those parties. Scott Fitzgerald was obsessed with showing how wealthy he was. That being said, at that point, he had only published 1 book. He was not that wealthy. So, you're probably asking, how do you throw these insane parties? He borrowed against future books. Yeah, that's right. He was confident enough as an author that he borrowed against future books. And no, we're not even talking about books in a series. No, he was confident enough as an author that he borrowed against future standalone projects. To me, as an author, that's utter insanity, but to Scott Fitzgerald, that just makes sense. During this drinking age of the 1920s, during 1925, he actually met Ernest Hemingway. At first, Ernest Hemingway and Scott Fitzgerald had an incredible relationship. Who knows why they had an early connection, probably had something to do with booze, but early on, like, they both helped each other. Honestly, from a certain point of view, Fitzgerald helped Hemingway get started. And yet this relationship ended with Ernest Hemingway shitting on Scott Fitzgerald until his life ended. Which I feel like now is the perfect time to get to the end of Scott Fitzgerald's life. Despite how so many people love The Great Gatsby now, it was a complete disappointment. After releasing his first book, Scott Fitzgerald was a huge sensation, but after releasing following books, he kind of lost all the traction. Ironically, The Great Gatsby was the book that people lost interest in, even though that's his greatest work of all time, looking back in hindsight. The biggest issue with Scott Fitzgerald was he was so consumed with alcoholism, where, like, he would be so focused on partying and, like, hanging out, that he would not even focus on writing until he needed more money. And even when he needed more money, he would borrow against future books before he actually wrote more books. To make things even worse, alcoholism seemed to extenuate issues for Scott Fitzgerald. Scott Fitzgerald was drunk all the time, and when he was drunk, he couldn't write. So early in his writing career, in the late 1920s, he was already in his decline. At this point, he took up screenwriting. Him and his first wife struggled for a long time, but late into the 1930s, he actually found a new resurgence. In the late 1930s, Scott Fitzgerald moved to Hollywood and had a new mindset on life. He started a new relationship with a columnist named Shira Ram. In Hollywood, he was working, but it was more a 9-to-5 job, so he couldn't really explore partying the way he used to when he was a famous writer. As a result, he started working on a book called The Last Tycoon. Unfortunately, before he published The Last Tycoon, his old life punched back. In 1940, before The Last Tycoon got published, Scott Fitzgerald died. The book was never finished. As a writer, that is honestly my greatest fear of all time. My greatest fear is never finishing one of my books. With that being said, let's get to Scott Fitzgerald's writing habits. So in terms of his writing habits, Scott Fitzgerald was very slow. Like me, Scott Fitzgerald likes to write really late at night, which works as currently 5 a.m. He was also the type of writer to have really active writing spurts and really dry writing droughts. Which, after this video of me trying to talk about F. Scott Fitzgerald, it's time for me to actually write like F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now, with most of these books, I like to write my own chapter where it feels fitting in the author's voice, but there was only one phrase that felt fitting in the terms of Scott Fitzgerald. "What are you doing, Nick?" "I'm a crypto man." "Who with?" I told him. "Never heard of them," he remarked decisively. That annoyed me. "You will," I answered shortly. "You will if you say to me." Yeah, the only line I changed is crypto, but other than that, it really fits the vibe of all the characters in this book are so obsessed with their self-worth where they don't care about actual events that happen around them. These characters are so pretentious, it's annoying. And I know that's the point of the book, but like, just reading again is just infuriating. Going back, what I will say is what's kind of scary is Scott Fitzgerald's bad writing habits are kind of similar to my own. The way he was very passionate about like writing spurts and that would go through writing droughts is very consistent to me. That being said, his dependence on future works was very strange to me. Like, the idea a writer would trust their future works to be just as good as their current works was very unusual, in my opinion. As a writer myself, I found it very interesting how he thought his works being successful was a sign that all his future works would also be successful. That being said, despite the fact that his final writing habits were absolutely awful, he was an incredible writer. So I kind of got off track the night of filming this. I was pretty hammered, but basically I tried to write like Scott Fitzgerald for 30 minutes, and it was really a struggle. On one hand, like all the writers I cover in this series, he is a better writer than me, but also I feel like his writing style really contrasts with my own. I would share a bit more of that writing now, but Scott Fitzgerald liked to write by hand on a notebook, which is what I did in this video, and between my handwriting being illegible to begin with, and how drunk I was at this point in the video, I can't read any of what I wrote. Instead, I'll end this video with this. I do not like Scott Fitzgerald's writing. I don't like The Great Gatsby, I don't like his style, but I can appreciate it for what it is. Scott Fitzgerald was a very talented writer, and it's a shame we did not get more writing from him because of his terrible writing habits and drinking habits. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to let me know what author you want to see me cover next in the comments. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel.